Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting, the first meeting of the Health and Human Services Subcommittee to order. I just want to first take this time out to thank our colleagues. We look like we're the same ones from last year, but just to make sure that we introduce. My name is Corey McCray. I'll be the chair of the Health and Human Services Subcommittee. To my right, I have Senator Craig Zucker. To my left, I have Senator Shelley Heddleman. And J.B. Jennings will be joining us momentarily. Committee staff has always been my guy, Philip, my wingman, and I look forward to just engaging all of the analysts that come before us. In the first committee report that we'll hear today, you all will be Madam Secretary of State, and we'll hear that from Micah, I was gonna say Micah Richards, and we'll let him begin.
Good morning. Thank you to the chair, committee, and the great state of Maryland for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Micah Richards, and this is the Secretary of State's Fiscal 26 Budget Analysis. The Secretary of State is responsible for attesting to the governor's signature on public documents, certifying candidates for nomination to appear on the presidential primary ballot, and other executive functions detailed in this analysis. Starting on page 1, the fiscal 26 budget increases by around $123,000 to $5.7 million. On page 2, the fiscal 24 Chapter 101 of 2023 provided a $982,000 grant for the Secretary of State to distribute to the sister states of Maryland Incorporated for the Exploring Cultural Linkages Between Black Marylanders and Civil Rights Movements Abroad project. As of January 10th, 2025, the Secretary of State has distributed around $209,000 of the grant for expenses related to the project in Maryland and Washington, D.C. The remaining balance of around $772,000 is expected to be used by the sister states of Maryland Incorporated on fiscal 25 projects. In fiscal 25, section 21 of Chapter 716 of 2024 gave $10,000 for the Secretary of State to distribute to the Build Haiti Foundation in Baltimore. The Build Haiti Foundation did not have the administrative means to receive the grant, therefore the funds will be reverted to the state. The International Affairs Division, also called the Maryland Sister States Program, which is different from the Sister States of Maryland Incorporated. The Secretary of State manages the Maryland Sister States Program, not the Sister States of Maryland Incorporation. The fiscal 26 budget includes a proposed deficiency for fiscal 25 of around $98,000 in general funds for travel and position reclassification in the International Affairs Division. On page 3, Exhibit 1 shows the overview of the fiscal 26 allowance. 75% of the budget supports personnel costs, 10% supports contractual services, and the largest portion of the 10% is for application software maintenance contracts. On page 4, Exhibit 2 shows the proposed budget change. Fiscal 26 allowance increases by around $123,000 compared to the fiscal 25 appropriation. The largest spending increase of around $217,000 is for salaries due to fiscal 25 cost of living adjustments. The largest decrease of around $232,000 is due to a grant award from the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy to the Secretary of State for the Address Confidentiality Program in fiscal 25 due to the funds not continuing in fiscal 26. On page 5, the Secretary of State has 0 vacant positions. On page 6, Exhibit 3 shows data on the Secretary of State's Charitable Enforcement Division, registered and delinquent charities. From fiscal 23 to 24, the number of registered charities increased by 5%. The number of delinquent charities decreased by 0.7%. The number of contacts to delinquent charities, which is also called enforcement activities, increased by 8%, and the number of delinquencies resolved decreased by 26%. Since the enforcement activities have increased and the delinquencies resolved are on a downward trend since fiscal 21, the Secretary of State should comment on the reason for the downward trend of delinquencies resolved despite increased contacts. On page 7 and 8, Exhibit 4 shows the Secretary of State's Charities and Legal Services Division notary public commissions process. From fiscal 23 to fiscal 24, the notaries process decreased by 0.8%. Also on page 8, the Secretary of State used $40,000 in Victims of Crime Act grant funding in fiscal 25 for the Maryland Safe at Home Address Confidentiality Program, database management to upgrade security and enhance functionalities. On page 9, Exhibit 5 shows the Address Confidentiality Program participation. From fiscal 23 to fiscal 24, the number of participants statewide increased by 9%, and the participants re-enrolling increased by 57%. Also on page 9, the Maryland Register Electronic Filing System, called ELF, is used by our state agencies to submit regulations to the Division of State Documents. For multiple years, the Secretary of State contracted Digital Management Incorporation to modernize ELF to make publishing regulations easier. However, due to Digital Management Corporation difficulties in completing the information technology project successfully, the Secretary of State decided in fiscal 25 to move on from the ELF 2.0 project to start a new initiative called ELF 3.0, which is expected to launch in between March and April of 2025. DLS requests for the Secretary of State to provide an update on ELF 3.0 status and functionalities. On page 10, DLS requests for the Secretary of State to concur with the governor's allowance. On page 11, the Secretary of State's 2024 Joint Chairman's Report response on the status of vacant positions stated, the Assistant Secretary of State for Charities and Legal Services position was converted into a budget assistant role. The Charities and Legal Services Division Administrator was promoted to be the director of the division. The forensic auditor position was converted to add another charities investigator position. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Seeing no questions, Madam Secretary and team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? It's
Yes, ma'am.
wonderful to be back in the Senate again, to see my former colleagues. It really was the most meaningful time of my life, believe it or not. So we worked together to pass meaningful legislation to improve and uplift the people of Maryland and make it a better world and leave no one behind, as my boss says. I want to present to you and also introduce my team. So if you have any questions whatsoever, they are here to answer them. On my left is my senior advisor, Joseph Gebhardt. On my right-hand side is my Deputy Secretary of State, Michael Laurie, who many of you have worked with too. And I'd like my division heads to stand up because you might have questions for them. First, it's our Assistant Secretary of Finance, Fred Smalls. Our ACP head is Tanya Pinkney, and our Division of State Documents Administrator is Gail Cackling. And our heading up our legislative unit is Ann Hoyer. And of course, Charities and Legals Director is Mike Schlein. And they are here because they want to make sure that if you have any questions whatsoever, we can answer them right away. We are willing to work with you, and we are accessible, so please do not hesitate to call us at any time, or myself. And thank you for giving us this opportunity. Oh, our International Affairs Director, Mindy Nish, just came by. She was taking around a delegation from Africa, so she's here now. Mindy? You can stand up? Okay, thank you. This is the wonderful esteemed subcommittee chair, Chairman McCrae, and also my former esteemed colleagues from the Senate. Just so you know, and you probably already know, thank you, Mr. Richards, too, for that very detailed report on what we do. The office generates significant revenues that go to the general fund and our special funds. Our office is authorized to spend about $2 million from its special funds to support our personnel costs and other operations. In total, we receive over $4 million in revenues from fees that are split between the general fund and the special fund. Approximately about $2 million go into the special funds to be spent on our personnel and operations. The remaining $2 million plus in payments received by the office is transferred to the state's general fund. Our analysis shows that $2.3 million was reverted by our agency to the general fund in FY24. Note the $4 million in payments received by our agency exceeds the $3.7 million requested in the FY26 general fund allowance. We bring in more than we spend in the general funds, just to let you know that about that. These minimal net funds from the state, they're around $1.5 million. In addition to the revenue we generate, go towards costs to maintain our 29 regular full-time employees, 6 permanent contractors, and other operating costs, including payments for services to do it that we have to turn over, and outside contractors. Personnel takes up a large portion of our budget, and the workload has only increased over the last few years. Our employees are very dedicated to serving the people of Maryland. The office has 5 operating divisions, which the division heads you just met, and I have an executive team which I lead, and we pay for 3 attorneys to our office from the Attorney General's office. Our divisions are the Address Confidentiality Program, Administration Finance, Charities and Legal, and the Division of State Documents and International Affairs. The critical agency, our agency operates within a very tight budget and limited staff allocation in carrying out many of its important and very varied functions. Our mission is to provide our citizens with services, assistance, and information pertaining to constitutionally, statutory, and regulatory functions that have been assigned to our office. In addition, we operate International Affairs Division with our very limited funds and staff, and we bring the world to Maryland and the state of Maryland to the world. Our net cost to the state budget is minimal, but the value add is really significant. In addition to the work completed by the divisions, the office processes extraditions, pardons, executive orders for the governor. From the robust international engagement to certification of documents for international use, to the production of official documents containing our Maryland regulations, to the registration of charitable organizations and the processing of applications for the notary public, and protecting the addresses of victims within our address confidentiality program. Our office manages a very broad scope of duties with superior customer service at its core. As you know, Governor Moore has prioritized investment in growth, and our office is actively seeking to attract investment and market access across the world. This small agency takes the lead for the executive branch's global outreach and strategy through the Subcabinet on International Affairs, a subcabinet which I chair and whose body includes members such as our Lieutenant Governor, 5 cabinet secretaries of Transportation, Environment, Commerce, Agriculture, Higher Education, and we recently updated our subcabinet by executive order to include the Adjutant General. With regular meetings and a comprehensive strategic plan in place, we are using the very strong assets of Maryland effectively across agencies to promote our state internationally. We are working to make this Maryland's decade, and our small agency's global outreach is aiding in this very noble effort. We have engaged in over 62 countries already in the past year, every continent except Antarctica. And we are helping to raise the state's profile with delegation visits from all around the world, such as what we were doing today. The key focus of our work is to brand Maryland as the global epicenter of advanced technologies, quantum computing, life sciences, cybersecurity, and aerospace, and things like artificial intelligence. We are also providing key climate leadership on the world stage with partnerships with our Maryland Department of Environment, allies, and counterparts from across the globe who are innovating at a very rapid pace. The Division on Charities and Legal Services registers and regulates charities and professional fundraisers under the Maryland Solicitations Act. This is a unique collaboration with the Office of the Attorney General, and our office has enhanced our investigative and enforcement capabilities. And the division regulated over 19,377 charities across the globe and currently has 15 legal actions underway and concluded 45 charity investigations and enforcement activities in FY24. We project that the figure to hover around 50 in the year going forward due to our enhanced resources. In the prior year, we added a full-time investigator and an assistant attorney general to our staff to help improve our reach. At no other time has Maryland been able to regulate charities more effectively than now. Every year, we additionally generate over $2 million for the general funds from these registration and late fees. The division also processed 13,968 new and renewing applications for notary public during FY24. We're also responsible for regulating notary publics totaling about 70,000 notaries. In FY24, there were about 43 notary enforcement investigation actions. The new notary database modernization is actually working, and we can use the database to help modernize our delivery of other services, such as international certifications. Among other accomplishments, the agency has processed our extraditions, commutations, pardons for the governor. While 366 extraditions were processed during just FY24, the Office of Secretary of State annually certifies thousands of documents for international use within the Division of Finance and Administration, and the office serves several hundred walk-in customers each month in addition to an equal number that are been mailed in. The office processes about 59,000 documents certified for international use. The restoration of processing fee from $2 to $5 has allowed us to contribute to an additional $177,000 to the general fund annually. That means we generate nearly $300,000 annually now, more than double the revenue source that goes directly to the general fund. The Division of State Documents, we are prioritizing the modernization of our COMAR publication platform and the process to publish the biweekly Maryland Register. We have contracted with Open Law Library for the development of the new publishing process and database with the electronic filing system to replace the failing 2.0 ELF system, which we spoke about last year. So we have made great progress. We have an allowance of $250,000 to cover the cost of operation and implementation of this new system. The contract was approved by the Board of Public Works, and the Department of Information Technology will be paying for the development costs that were offset by an outside grant for the vendor to assist with the project. This company has already contracted to complete similar projects to publish like Baltimore City and the Code of the District of Columbia. So they are very experienced in doing this. Unlike the rollout of the ELF 2.0, we are intentionally working with the vendor to secure an actual database as required under the law and appropriate beta testing and training. The sole source vendor was identified by DoIT, the DoIT contractor who completed a full study of solutions about our ELF problems. After a prior analysis, identified over 50 failures. DoIT's study confirmed our earlier internal determination. The failed ELF 2.0 system that we had inherited lacked the statutorily required database, and the rollout was partially due, and probably primarily due, to bad communication, design, and training. The poor product design and deployment combined with a series of retirements created enormous challenges that we have overcome since that time. And we have worked hard to maintain employee morale under these trying circumstances. And we have hired supplemental IT support. Additionally, we have hired some excellent employees to replace the retired veterans, and we are confident that the new vendor will provide much enhanced COMAR experience for the users. The new vendor, Open Law Library, is prioritizing user experience, accessibility, and training. The COMAR part of the product will be beta tested in February and will be fully active in March. There is subsequent process to integrate the register with COMAR to create a human-centered approach to the software and enhance efficiency. The poorly designed ELF 2.0 created more redundant processes and created more problems. The design modernization is required. Agencies and the public will now have better and more useful experience searching Maryland's regulatory code. Excuse me, I get a frog in my throat here. We previously sold many printed copies of COMAR and the register, but they're now available free online, which is different. Many view the COMAR online. However, platforms with which we have been licensing have a much better accessibility and usefulness than our site. Our site was initially designed to comply with statutory requirements, but not provide more than free access to the code. Securing a very strong platform for the original source code will make us the first and last stop for many people curious about the law and the rules of the government. Maryland is very proud of our laws and code, but the delivery system to access our regulatory code is outdated and in need of this update that we are now providing. Our office is extremely proud of the work accomplished by the Address Confidentiality Program, known as ACP, which many of you are aware of. I know that Senator Hedelman has worked on this too. It assists 1,867 active program participants and shields real property, 115 deeds. I especially am proud of this because my legislation when I was a senator allowed this to occur, helping to make Maryland's ACP one of the best in the country. The ACP currently operates with 5 staff and 2 funded by federal government VOCA funds, which are drying up in the coming years. We are monitoring the availability of these funds going forward. And I want to state that our office concurs very strongly with the governor's allowance, and the office agrees with the recommendation. I'd like to turn over now to the questions that are posed by DLS. The first question is Secretary of State to comment on the reasons for the downward trend of delinquencies resolved despite increased contacts. The increase in enforcement actions was due to charities being sent automated notices through our online filing system, which went active in August 2022. These notifications were sent to the organizations prior to the organization becoming delinquent, which occurs 60 days after the date of their registration is due. It gives the organization additional notifications so they can maintain compliance without becoming delinquent. Furthermore, the newer online system automatically updates the status of the entity. In the previous system that was reliant on paper applications, an organization may have mailed their annual registration paperwork to us on time. However, due to delay in processing time, their status would appear as delinquent, even though we had already received their paperwork and may have been complete. This would cause them to be temporarily counted as delinquent, when in fact they were not. The old system resulted in an artificially high delinquencies during busy filing periods, which resulted in artificially high delinquencies resolved during those busy periods. The newer system does not categorize these online filers awaiting review as delinquent until their annual registration is actually reviewed and it's determined whether their annual registration was complete or not, ensuring that the organization is not labeled as delinquent unless it is indeed fact delinquent at any point in time. We have a second question too about providing an update on the ELF 3.0 status and functionalities. The ELF 3.0 will have an operational COMAR site in Maryland with beta testing occurring in February. The system will be similar to the product of the same vendor, Open Law Library, created for the Code of the District of Columbia. The main benefits of this product are searchability, connection links to other code, accessibility to those visually impaired, restoration of a database, which is very important, cybersecurity protections, and open source availability, automatic updates to the code, ease of use for all users, including agencies, and the correction of obvious typos that appear in the code. And you'll be able to look back in time to find what the regulation was at any given point in time. And we have over 100,000 viewers of COMAR online, and we're excited to have a new interface with our customers. It's important that our nations have easy access to our laws. And now, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully turn it over to you for any questions from the committee members.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Madam Secretary. There being no questions, just one comment. One is that it's always good to see you walk in these halls. Once a senator, always a senator, so welcome home.
Thank you, Mr.
again.
Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards, for that phenomenal readout. And colleagues, we will bring up Ms. Natalie Andrade to give us the presentation on analysts on Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I'm Natalia Andrade, here with the Department of Legislative Services to present the fiscal 26 allowance for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. As you can see on page 1 of the analysis, you will see that the fiscal 26 budget increases by $970,000 or 16.1%, bringing the total to $7 million. On page 2, the fiscal 26 budget includes a proposed efficiency appropriation totaling $689,000 for fiscal 25. These funds address shortfalls in personal expenditures caused by underestimated salary costs in prior years. After accounting for new positions, budgeted personnel costs decrease in fiscal 26 compared to fiscal 25 working appropriation. While the agency has expressed concern about this decrease, they believe that the fiscal 26 budget will adequately meet the staffing needs, reflecting appropriate funding levels for both existing and new positions. On page 3, Exhibit 1 provides a breakdown of the fiscal 26 allowance. Personnel expenses account for 89% of the total budget. The remaining funds are allocated to technology, rent, and events like the gala, which represent 1% of the total budget. On page 4, Exhibit 2 outlines the line item changes to the budget. As you can see, the $970,000 increase is driven primarily by $1.2 million in salary and fringe benefits for 11 new positions and 1 contractual conversion. This increase is partially offset by a reduction in salary and fringe benefits for existing staff, reflecting adjustments in prior year deficiencies. On page 5, in the personnel section, you will find that the Commission's fiscal 26 allowance includes 11 new positions and 1 contractual conversion to address the long-standing staffing shortages. Turning to page 6, the key observations section begins with a discussion of recent patterns in civil rights inquiries and complaints. Exhibit 3 shows that in fiscal 24, inquiries rose to 2,297, while complaints increased significantly to 966. The Commission attributes this growth to enhanced education and outreach efforts. On page 8, Exhibit 4 focuses on case backlog. In fiscal 24, employment cases accounted for 314 unassigned cases, or 32% of the total complaints received for processing, while 2% were public accommodation cases. Exhibit 5 on page 9 highlights the status of active and pending cases in fiscal 24, with employment cases comprising the majority at 363, followed by housing at 212, and public accommodation cases at 25. Of these, 392 cases had been open for over a year, including 319 employment cases, 68 housing cases, and 5 public accommodation cases. Exhibit 6 on page 10 illustrates ongoing challenges in meeting case processing benchmarks. Housing cases in fiscal 24 averaged 331 days to process, far exceeding the 100-day benchmark. Employment cases averaged 350 days, and public accommodation cases took an average of 448 days. Also on pages 10 to 12, an audit conducted by the Office of Legislative Audits in October 24 identified 5 key findings that included delays in case processing due to staffing shortages, insufficient documentation for vendor payments, lapses in oversight of corporate purchasing cards, inadequate controls over gala revenue and expenses, and insufficient cash receipt controls. The Commission has acknowledged these issues and outlined corrective actions such as improving documentation, enhancing oversight, and strengthening financial controls. Finally, on page 13, the Department of Legislative Services recommends adopting a committee narrative requesting that the Commission submit a report evaluating the impact of adding 11 new positions and 1 contractual conversion on case assignment and backlog management. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Andrade. Seeing no questions, I'll turn the floor over to our Executive Director, Cleveland Horton, and his team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Health and Human Services Subcommittee. It truly is our pleasure and honor to be before you this afternoon. I would like to take a moment just to introduce those staff members that I do have with me today. To my left, we have our long-standing General Counsel, Glendora Hughes, AKA our muscle. To my right, we have our recently returning Assistant Director, Nicolette Young. And to my farthest to my right, we have our 72-hour recently appointed Deputy Director, Yolanda Saunier. And so we would say that all questions should be directed to her. She is full of we are also joined by our Education and Outreach Director, Candace Gray, if she wouldn't mind standing. And we do have my Special Assistant, Spencer Dove, who is also with us here today. Typically when we come before you all, Mr. Chairman, we typically say the same thing year in and year out in reference to the great work that we do in the additional resources that our agency continues to need. I know you all have our annual report that was submitted in our testimony, so I won't go into great detail regurgitating that same information. But I would just like to start with a bit of a personal anecdote. On January 9th, 2025, Baltimore City experienced its first homicide in the 5900 block of Daywalt Avenue. My childhood home is on that block. In fact, the homicide happened directly in front of my childhood home where my mother still resides. And hearing the news when I contacted my mother, my first concern was, my thought was, hopefully she was at work and not at home during the time. But with our new teleworking environment, she was teleworking that day, so she happened to be home. When I contacted her, she did inform me that she did, in fact, see and witness the brutal murder of a young man directly in her home. She immediately walked outside to check on the individual. My immediate response to my mother was, we have law enforcement for that. You should have stayed in the house. You should not enter a crime scene. You should have been worried about your safety. And she kindly responded to me and said, well, last time I checked, I was the parent, right? But what she said to me that day was that she did not want this young man to die alone, right? And regardless of who he was or what he did, she had no connection to him. She had never seen him. She felt in her heart that she did not want this young man to die alone. She proceeded to talk about how, as a community, we've lost our humanity, and how we need to all figure out how we dig deep and protect humanity. Then she looked up at me, because obviously you all can tell I'm 6'7", my mother's a little bit over 5 feet. And she said to me with kind of tears in her eyes and said, isn't that what you do every day? Protecting humanity, right? So when we think about where we are as a community, as an agency, as a state, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is charged with defending and protecting humanity every day. We always say that when we talk about priorities, that civil rights is a priority. But we demonstrate that priority by putting the resources behind the agency that's responsible for protecting civil rights throughout our entire state. So from our perspective, we are truly appreciative of the analysis done by Natalie, Andre, and the current administration's belief in the importance of our agency to increase our budget to allow us to get some additional resources. Our agency is down to about 39 personnel, down from a little over 100 years ago. But for an agency of our size and our charge and our mission, 39 individuals is unacceptable to protect this entire state. We are hopeful that this subcommittee will concur with the governor's allowance to allow us to bring in additional pens so that we can collectively ensure that we are protecting humanity day in and day out with the work that we do at the commission. I am fortunate enough to be able to talk about the great work because I have great leaders beside me who ensure that no matter how many staff we have, that we never falter in our commitments to the community. But they need resources. They need bodies. Our Education Outreach Department has 3 people. So in order for them to go out throughout this entire state and educate, let folks know what their rights are, respond to issues within communities, they need more individuals. Our legal department has 2 attorneys. In order for us to be able to appropriately and timely litigate cases, we need more legal staff. Our investigators who are carrying caseloads higher than what we consider to be acceptable need assistance in being able to respond to complaints of discrimination within a timely fashion. Internally, we've identified our internal benchmark to be able to respond to complaints within 180 days. Currently, that response time is about 1.5 years to 2 years. Under any reasonable standard, that is unacceptable. We are hopeful and optimistic that with the governor's allowance in this budget, we will be able to bring on significant resources to address that as well. So again, we ask, Mr. Chairman, that the subcommittee sincerely consider and concur with the governor's allowance for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And with that, we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just one question. You have no issue with the recommendation of the committee narrative, the report out, if the pens are approved?
No problem at all.
Okay, perfect. Seeing no questions, I think this is the first time I get to see you in this capacity, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you and your team. You know, just knowing the work that your family has done in Baltimore City and being able to currently do statewide, I just want to make sure and reiterate that I keep them in my prayers. Ms. Andrade, just thank you for your work, your thorough analysis, and colleagues. At this time, we'll move on to the next agency, which is the Executive Department of Boards, Commissions, and Offices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. My name is Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for the Boards, Commissions, and Offices unit of the Executive Department. The Boards, Commissions, and Offices, BCO, contains 9 entities that provide coordination for executive branch functions or make recommendations on problems affecting the administration of the government or the welfare of the state. On page 1, the fiscal 26 budget for BCO increases by approximately $550,000. This is after accounting for a proposed fiscal 25 deficiency appropriation of about $76,000 in general fund to transfer one position from the governor's office to the grants office to serve as the agency's head. On page 3, Exhibit 1 shows that BCO's fiscal 26 allowance is $12.8 million. 20% of this allowance accounts for the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, GOSBA, followed by 17% for the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives, GOCI. On pages 4 and 5, Exhibit 2 shows the details of the changes in proposed fiscal 26 budget. Approximately $1.1 million of the increase accounts for salary increases and associated fringe benefits. This is partially offset by a net decrease in 2.3 full-time equivalent positions for around $221,000 and a one-time judiciary reimbursable fund for the Maryland Automated Guidelines System. I also want to note that the fiscal 26 allowance includes a one-time feasibility study consulting services of $20,000 for GOSBA's Mentorship Protégé program that was established by Chapter 258 of 2021. A brief program description is at the bottom of page 5, and we request the agency to comment on the status of implementing Chapter 258, which took effect on October 1st, 2021. On page 6, personnel data reflects a net decrease of 1 position after accounting for transfers and new positions. In fiscal 26, GOSBA adds 3 new positions, 2 of which are added to support the new mentorship program, and 1 new position to implement Chapter 584 of 2024 that requires GOSBA to identify potential contracting prospects for small businesses. As of December 31st, 2024, 5 vacant positions have been reported that have been unfilled for less than a year. The department notes that 2 of these vacant positions are expected to be filled on January 22nd, and other positions are being actively recruited. Moving on to key observations, on page 7, Exhibit 3, it shows that the Minority Business Enterprise MBE program participation in fiscal 24 dropped slightly to 17.4%. This is still below the 29% participation goal. A new performance indicator included in GOSBA's Managing for Results submission starting fiscal 24 shows that about 8,500 certified small businesses participated in this program in fiscal 24. On page 8, Exhibit 4 shows that the Small Business Reserve Program, SBR participation has declined to 9.8% in fiscal 24. This is also below the 15% program participation goal. Like MBE, a new indicator shows that about 4,500 certified firms participated in this program in fiscal 24. GOSBA also included a new indicator for another program, the Veteran-Owned Small Business Enterprise Program that was established in 2010. A brief program information is included at the top of page 9. In fiscal 24, about 900 certified veteran-owned businesses participated in this program. Also, a press release from the Governor's Office in September 2024 increased the program's goal to 3%. In its fiscal 23 annual report, GOSBA reported this program's participation at only 0.75%. We request GOSBA to provide the program's participation rate for fiscal 24 and discuss efforts to reach the new 3% participation goal. On page 9, Exhibit 5 shows the annual number of various outreach events GOSBA hosts. The number of events has increased to 47 for small businesses and 14 for the procurement community. This is the highest in both categories from fiscal 2020 to 2024. On page 10, the first paragraph notes that there was a committee narrative in fiscal 24 JCR that required GOSBA to continue administering the 2 surveys. agency MB participation and program liaison surveys, and report the results to the budget committees. As of writing this analysis, the report was not available. However, GASBA has submitted the report since then. We request GASBA to discuss the reason for delay in reporting the results of the surveys. DLS also recommends restricting $100,000 in general funds from GASBA pending submission of the results of these two surveys by December 1st, 2025. The last key observation at the bottom of page 10 discusses the governor's January 7th executive order that streamlined GOCI to include 9 commissions, of which 6 are ethnic commissions. We request the executive department to comment on how streamlining these units impact GOCI operations and its budgetary requirements. The recommended action to restrict general fund pending survey report from GASBA is in page 11. An update on the report as required by fiscal 22 JCR on the extent to which racial bias is present in sentences assigned through the state's judicial system prepared by the Maryland State Commission on Criminal Sentencing Policy is in page 12. Pages 13 to 15 are appendices. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rye. Seeing no questions at this time, we'll bring up our respective boards and commissions, and it's always good to see you, Madam Special Secretary.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator McCray and members of the subcommittees. The following written testimony is provided on behalf of the boards and commissions and offices. We thank you for the opportunity to appear before the subcommittees each year as you review the proposed budget. My name is Maria Martinez, and I'm the Special Secretary of the Governor's Office of Small, Minority, and Women Business Affairs. Here with me today is Nichelle Johnson, to my left, MB Ombudsman Executive, and also to my right, Executive Director Lawrence Walker Sr. of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. I'd like to also take a moment to recognize members of the team for GASBA who has worked diligently for the work that we have accomplished this past year. I would also like to thank Mona Vaidya and her team for her guidance and support through this process. We are very grateful. The boards, commissions, and offices are comprised of various budgetary units. I would like to introduce my colleagues in attendance today. Please stand as I call your name. Jennifer Algier, Executive Director of Maryland State Ethics Commission. David Souley, Executive Director, Maryland State Commission on Criminal Sentencing Policy. Erica Snipes, Executive Director of the Board of Public Employee Relations. And Michael Carnahan, member of the Maryland State Board of Contract Appeals. We would like to thank our assigned analyst, Ms. Yashodhara Rai, for her hard work and acknowledgments of our efforts throughout the analysis. She has been a pleasure to work with, and we really appreciate her support through this. Before reviewing our testimony, I would like to address one correction to the budget analysis provided regarding the MBE participation numbers included on page 7, Exhibit 3. I brought copies of our annual report with me today, and I believe you have them in front of you. We finalized and published the report just a day ago, which shows a significant difference in the participation attainment number reported, 17.4%. to the actual 21.95%. The data collected by GASBA is not finalized and published until January. As a result, DLS analysts rely on the MFR data, which provides estimates rather than the finalized figures included in the annual report. We will work with DBM to clearly note the MBE results in the MFR estimates until the annual report is produced. Additionally, GASBA's overall VSB attainment percentages nearly doubled and reached a record 1.8% total goal attainment. One final point that I would like to address before we begin our comments is the recommendations from the Department of Legislative Services to restrict $100,000 in general funds from GASBA pending the submission of the agency's MBE participation and liaison attainment survey results. Our office respectfully disagrees with this recommendation. We submitted this report on January 15th and have an exceptionally tight timeframe to return this report around from data collection to publishing date. coupled with many competing priorities at the end of the year. Written testimony has been provided on the comments requested, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Seeing no questions, Madam Special Secretary, always good to see you. I appreciate the communication that's coming from your respective office about the one concern or one objective that I had, so I say thank you for that. And colleagues, I'd also like to lift up Ms. Fry. Just thank you for the respective analysis and the job that you do every day. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the next respective agency, which is our last agency for the day, and I'd like to ask Ms. Camaro if she could come up to read out the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services and Systems. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
Bless.
You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Naomi Camaro. I'm a budget analyst with DLS. I'll be discussing the fiscal 26 allowance for the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MIMS. MIMS coordinates all components of the statewide emergency medical services system. The chart on page 1 shows that the fiscal budget, as introduced, is $25.8 million for MIMS, about $3 million increase from the current fiscal year. Also on this chart, you can see that the majority of MIMS funding is coming from special funds from the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operations Fund. On the next page, I'll just point out that the fiscal 26 allowance also includes a fiscal 25 deficiency to support renovation of the Parole Tower project. The deficiency is $280,000. There's also $1 million budgeted in the Board of Public Works fiscal 25 capital budget for the project. On page 3, this pie chart breaks out the fiscal 26 allowance for MIMS, the largest portion of which is dedicated to personnel. There's also a little over $3 million for telecommunications expenditures and about $2.3 million for building and equipment maintenance, including maintenance on the communication towers across the state. Pages 4 and 5 summarize the major changes in the budget between fiscal 25 and fiscal 26. Again, the total budget increases by a little over $3 million. The largest increase is in salary increases, and that's $1.2 million. There's also $390,000 in the fiscal 26 budget for a new program, which is out of the CDC National Health Safety Network, aimed at understanding the hospital bed capacity across the nation, and MIMS is piloting that for Maryland. On page 6, personnel data for MIMS is summarized. There's 2 new positions in fiscal 26. One is a program manager for the AED naloxone program, which is required by 2024 legislation. MIMS is required to co-locate 2 doses of naloxone with AED devices in public buildings, so they're hiring a program manager to oversee that. And then there's also a contractual conversion, which has already been filled. As of December 31st, 2024, MIMS had 6 vacancies, one of which has been vacant for a little over a year. MIMS said that they're currently interviewing candidates for that role. There's also 2 contractual conversions that are included in that vacancy count, and both of those positions are currently filled. Page 7 starts a discussion around MIMS roles in addressing emergency department wait times. Maryland State has some of the highest emergency department wait times in the country. The exhibit on page 8 compares, using data from calendar 2023, the median emergency department wait times in every U.S. state and Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Maryland's average time in 2023 was 250 minutes, which is above the U.S. average of 163 minutes. So MIMS has taken part in several different efforts to understand this problem and make recommendations to improve it. One of them was the General Assembly Hospital Throughput Work Group, which concluded in January 2024 and released a report in March 2024 with 17 policy recommendations. One of the policy recommendations is directly related to MIMS in terms of enhancing data collection from providers to increase efficiency. I'll also point out, related to this is MIMS overseeing the Critical Care Coordination Center, which was established during the COVID-19 pandemic to alleviate some of the strain on the hospital system. In fiscal 2023 and 2024, MIMS received funding through budget amendment for the C4. At the close of June 2024, they placed the C4 in hibernation due to a lack of funding, but indicated that they intend to reopen the C4 in fiscal 2026 due to feedback from the emergency medical community saying that this was serving an important need. I do want to point out that at the close of fiscal 23 and fiscal 24, MIMS did cancel some of their appropriation that was originally allocated for the C4. And so DLS is asking MIMS to specify what amount of the fiscal 2024 appropriation for C4 was canceled, and also how it plans to source funding to continue the C4 in fiscal 2026, given that there's no funding currently in the fiscal 26 allowance for this purpose. And with that, DLS recommends concurring with the governor's allowance. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Camaro. Dr. Delbridge.
Just so you don't think I'm so bold as to show up without a backup team, they're way back there. Kelly Hammond's our Chief Administrative Officer, and Christian Mealy is our new Director of Government Affairs, who I believe some of you probably know. As was pointed out, MEMS is responsible for coordinating the entirety of the statewide EMS system, and it does that in part by promulgating statewide clinical protocols, by licensing and certifying nearly 20,000 EMS clinicians, EMTs, paramedics, and the like, operating a statewide communication center and designating trauma and specialty centers. In the past year, approximately 578,000 people have been transported by the EMS system to Maryland hospitals. So that's nearly 1 in 10 Marylanders encounters the EMS system every year. We're appreciative of the work of Naomi Camuro and also Christina Jorge-Tunyan, our DBM budget analyst, and thank them. As was pointed out, MEMS closely monitors the EMS to emergency department transfer times, the elapsed time it takes for an EMS personnel to effect transitions of patients' care after arrival at an emergency department. That's part of the data that we collect to improve the healthcare system overall. We provide weekly updates of those transfer of care intervals to every hospital emergency department leadership and hospital leadership, and also monthly to the Health Services Cost Review Commission in efforts to enhance its work in the emergency department dramatic improvement effort, which engages every hospital in the state to try to improve hospital efficiency as it pertains to the emergency department. In terms of the EMS to emergency department transfer of care interval, approximately 40% of hospital emergency departments meet the 35-minute target more than 90% of the time, which we consider to be consistent with a highly reliable organization. We are engaged in this connectivity initiative pilot funded by the CDC through the National Health Safety Network. That's in collaboration with the Maryland Department of Health, and are working closely with hospitals to try to get them on board. Hopefully that'll provide a real snapshot in time of hospital capacity availability. We designate hospital specialty centers, 10 trauma centers, 24 cardiac interventional centers, 2 burn centers, 39 stroke centers, and 15 perinatal centers. And in the past year have redesignated 31 of those facilities. Mr. Miro mentioned the AED registry. We keep track of AEDs in public places throughout the state. There are nearly 16,000 of them, and are working toward an October 1st, 2027 deadline to have naloxone co-located with AEDs in certain public places. And in terms of the Critical Care Coordination Center, Mr. Miro mentioned that that was stood up as part of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic in December of 2020. In its 43 months of operation, the C4 fielded 7,000 calls from emergency departments and hospital clinicians trying to match their patients' intensive care needs with available hospital resources anywhere in the state. Approximately 30% of those cases, with the assistance and guidance of the C4 intensivists, pediatricians, and coordinators, actually obviated the need for the patient to be transferred at all, reserving valuable resources for others in need. The grant funding for that initiative expired in June of 2024. We actually canceled $250,000 of appropriated grant funding for fiscal year 2024 because we found efficiencies in operations and scaled it to the need. Our intent to continue operations in the next fiscal year is entirely contingent upon availability of grant funding, which we continue to be on the lookout for. And if there's no grant funding, C4 will not reanimate. We're more than grateful for your support over the years, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Hettleman.
I just have one quick question. And the C4 services that you provided, those 7,000 calls, was that really during the critical time of dealing with COVID? Or you saw calls for that program even after it was sort of?
Even after, it's definitely seasonal. And at times like now where hospitals are particularly at capacity with respiratory viruses, that would be sort of consistent with what we saw in terms of the demand for C4 services.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Dr. Delbridge, just wanted to say thank you and thank you for your leadership in reference to what you commit to the state of Maryland with and your extraordinary team back there. And also, Ms. Camaro, just thank you for your readout in reference to the analysis and look forward to many more days with you in the coming weeks. Colleagues, seeing that this was the last agency, please have a blessed Friday.